The wrench slipped from my grease-stained fingers as I heard my daughter's voice carry through the autumn night air. I was under my pickup truck in the driveway, trying to fix a transmission leak that had been plaguing me for weeks, when Judy's words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Dad, you don't get it. Mom's done playing safe. She wants a real man, and Kellan makes her feel alive, not your boring fix-everything routine." I lay there in the darkness beneath my truck, listening to my 16-year-old daughter destroy what was left of my world with the casual cruelty only teenagers can master. Through the kitchen window above, I could see shadows moving, my wife Jade and our daughter having what appeared to be an intense conversation. "Your father is too safe, Judy. I need excitement in my life, not someone who spends every weekend repairing something around the house." Jade's voice drifted down to me, each word carefully chosen to cut deep. My name is Trevan, and until that moment, I thought being reliable was a virtue. I'm 40 years old, a mechanical engineer at the automotive plant here in Millbrook, New Hampshire. For 20 years, I've been the guy who fixes things: cars, appliances, relationships, problems. The guy everyone calls when they need something done right. Apparently, that makes me boring. I slid out from under the truck and wiped my hands on an old rag, trying to process what I'd just heard. Kellan. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Jade had mentioned him a few times over the past month. A friend from the gym, someone exciting with stories from his military days. Someone who made her laugh. Someone who wasn't me. The house felt different when I walked inside. Jade was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Judy had disappeared upstairs, probably posting something on social media about her pathetic father. "How was your day?" I asked, testing the waters. Jade barely looked up. "Fine. Going out with friends tonight. Don't wait up." Friends? Right. That night, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I went through Jade's things, not because I'm controlling or paranoid, but because sometimes when you're fixing something, you need to understand exactly what's broken. In her purse, tucked behind her regular phone, I found a second device. A cheap smartphone with exactly 3 contacts: Kellan, someone named Felix, and a lawyer named Marlowe Trasker. The text messages painted a picture that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to be free of him," read one message to Kellan. "Asher suspects nothing. He's too busy playing mechanic to notice I'm planning my escape." Kellan's response was worse. "Your husband sounds like a real winner. Don't worry, babe. Soon you'll have all the excitement you can handle." I set the phone down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. 20 years of marriage, and this is how it ends, with secret phones and plans made behind my back. But here's the thing about being an engineer. We're problem solvers. We look at broken systems and figure out how to fix them. And sometimes, when something is too damaged to repair, we scrap it and build something better. The next morning, I drove to Kellan's gym. Iron Paradise, a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town where guys like Kellan go to pretend they're still soldiers. I waited in the parking lot until I saw him emerge. Tall, muscular, the kind of guy who probably tells war stories that get more dramatic with each telling. His SUV was parked in the prime spot near the entrance, a black Escalade that screamed, "Look at me." I waited until the parking lot was empty, then got to work. 4 slashed tires and a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Regret usually starts here. I was back home before Jade woke up, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed around noon, a text from an unknown number. "Saw Asher at the gym parking lot this morning. Looked angry. Thought you should know. Gordon." Gordon Henderson, my nosy neighbor who somehow always knows everyone's business. Apparently, he'd been watching me more carefully than I'd realized. That evening, Jade's behavior confirmed my suspicions. She was jumpy, constantly checking her secret phone, whispering into it when she thought I wasn't listening. "Kellan's having car trouble," she announced at dinner. I'm going to help him deal with the insurance. That's nice of you, I said, cutting my steak with deliberate precision. What kind of trouble? Vandalism. Someone slashed his tires and left a threatening note. Judy looked up from her phone. That's horrible. Who would do something like that? I met my daughter's eyes across the table. Probably someone who doesn't like being taken for a fool. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. That night, I lay in bed listening to Jade make hushed phone calls from the bathroom. She thought I was asleep, but I was wide awake, planning my next move. Because here's what Jade and Kellan didn't understand. I might be safe, I might be boring, but I'm also very, very good at solving problems. And they had just become my biggest problem. The game was about to begin, and they had no idea what they were up against. 3 days later, the whole town knew about Jade's affair. Not because I told anyone, I didn't have to. In a place like Millbrook, secrets have a way of spreading like spilled oil, seeping into every crack and crevice until everyone's contaminated. It started at the grocery store. I was picking up coffee when I overheard Betty Morrison talking to her sister about poor Asher Trevan and his wandering wife. By the time I got to work, my supervisor Jim was giving me sympathetic looks and my coworkers were avoiding eye contact. Jade, meanwhile, had decided to go public with her relationship. I first saw them together at Murphy's Diner on Main Street. She was laughing at something Kellan was saying, her hand resting on his arm like she owned him. They sat in the window booth where everyone could see them, making no effort to hide their relationship. When Kellan spotted me through the window, he had the audacity to wave. "That's him," I heard someone whisper behind me. "That's the husband." The humiliation was surgical in its precision. At the hardware store, conversation stopped when I walked in. At the gas station, the clerk couldn't meet my eyes. Even the mailman looked uncomfortable when he handed me my bills. But the worst was yet to come. Friday night at the Iron Tap, our local dive bar, I walked into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Kellan was holding court at the bar, telling anyone who'd listen about his conquest. Jade was starving for attention. He was saying to a group of guys I recognized from the plant. 20 years with a guy who thinks excitement means changing the oil filter. She needed a real man. The bartender, Mike Sullivan, caught my eye and shook his head slightly. A warning. But I was already walking toward the bar. "Kellan Brooks, right?" I said, sliding onto the stool next to him. He turned, and I saw the moment he recognized me. His confident smile faltered for just a second before returning full force. "Asher, heard a lot about you. All boring, I'm sure." The guys around us shifted uncomfortably. Mike started wiping down glasses with unnecessary intensity. "Look, man," Kellan said, "I didn't plan for this to happen. Sometimes married women get tired of their husbands and start looking for excitement," I interrupted. "I get it. The question is, what happens when the excitement wears off?" Kellan's jaw tightened. "Maybe that's not something you need to worry about anymore." "Maybe not. But here's something you should worry about. Excitement is expensive. Hope you're ready for that bill." I finished my drink and stood up. "Enjoy the honeymoon phase, Kellan. From what I hear, it doesn't last long." I was halfway to the door when he called after me. "At least I can keep a woman satisfied." I stopped, turned around slowly, and walked back to the bar. The entire place had gone quiet. "You know what's interesting about satisfaction, Kellan? It's temporary. But regret? That lasts forever. Ask my wife in 6 months how satisfied she feels when she realizes what she traded away for a few cheap thrills. Is that a threat? It's a prediction." The confrontation made the rounds by morning. By the time I got to work Monday, everyone was talking about the showdown at the Iron Tap. Some people seemed to think I'd handled myself well. Others whispered about how pathetic it was to see a man begging for his wife back. They didn't understand. I wasn't begging. I was laying groundwork. Tuesday brought a new humiliation. Divorce papers. Jade had them served at my workplace, in front of my coworkers, by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sorry, man," he said as he handed me the envelope. "Just doing my job." I opened them right there in the break room, with half the plant watching. The terms were brutal. Jade wanted the house, half my pension, and alimony. She was claiming emotional abandonment and irreconcilable differences. What she was really claiming was that 20 years of marriage meant nothing compared to a few weeks of excitement. That afternoon, I did something that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. I cleaned out our joint savings account and moved every penny to a new account in my name only. Technically legal, my name was on the account too. Morally questionable, maybe. But I was done being the nice guy. When Jade discovered the missing money that evening, she came storming into the garage where I was working on my truck. "You took our money!" I didn't look up from the engine. "I took my money. You want a divorce? You can pay for it yourself." "That's $20,000, Asher. It's also 20 years of my life. Seems like a fair trade." She stood there sputtering, probably trying to figure out how the boring, predictable husband had suddenly grown a backbone. "Kellan's going to hear about this. I'm counting on it." That night, Judy confronted me in the kitchen. "Mom says you're trying to ruin her life." "Your mom ruined her own life. I'm just making sure she pays for it. She deserves to be happy. She deserves exactly what she's going to get." My daughter looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. The old Asher would have tried to work things out, would have gone to counseling, would have begged Jade to reconsider. The new Asher had different plans. Because I'd been doing some research on Kellan Brooks, and what I'd found was very interesting. Military record that didn't quite add up. A business that seemed to have no actual customers. And most intriguingly, a pattern of relationships with married women that always seemed to end badly. Jade thought she'd traded up for excitement. What she'd actually done was trade a stable life for a man who collected other people's wives like trophies. But she was about to learn that some trophies come with a very high price. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 weeks after the divorce papers were served. I was awake anyway, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and a stack of documents I'd been studying for hours. "Asher?" Jade's voice was shaky, desperate. "I need to talk to you." "It's 3 a.m. Please, something's wrong, something's really wrong." I could hear traffic in the background like she was calling from a payphone. "Where are you?" "I can't say, just meet me at the old Miller farm, the one off Route 9. Please." The line went quiet. I should have stayed home. Should have let her deal with whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. But 20 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, even when your wife has spent the last month destroying everything you built together. The Miller farm had been abandoned for years, just a collection of rotting buildings at the end of a dirt road. I found Jade sitting on the porch steps of the farmhouse, still wearing the dress she'd had on at dinner, wherever she'd been having dinner. She looked up when my headlights swept across the yard. Even in the darkness, I could see she'd been crying. "Thank you for coming." I turned off the engine but didn't get out. "What's this about, Jade?" "Kellan's not who I thought he was." "Shocking." "I'm serious, Asher. I found things. Documents, files, conversations he didn't know I heard." She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "He's involved in something bad. Really bad." "Such as?" "I think he's selling information. Government information, defense contracts, blueprints, things like that." I finally got out of the truck. "And you know this how?" "I saw emails, technical drawings, things that looked like they came from defense contractors." She was talking faster now, the words tumbling out. "And there was a meeting last week with some men who didn't speak English very well. They gave him money, Asher. A lot of money. So call the police." "I can't. I'm involved now. He's been using my credentials from the museum to authenticate documents. If this comes out, I'll go to prison." I stared at her in the moonlight. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, had managed to get herself tangled up with a man who was apparently selling state secrets to foreign buyers. What do you want from me? Help me figure out how to get away from him, how to fix this before it gets worse. This is how regret usually starts. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't, please. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I stepped closer. You didn't make mistakes, Jade. You made choices. You chose excitement over stability. You chose a stranger over your husband. You chose to throw away 20 years for a few weeks of feeling special. I know I was wrong. But this is bigger than our marriage now. If Kellan gets caught, he's going to drag me down with him. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was too boring for you. I turned to walk back to my truck. Asher, wait. There's something else. I stopped. He's married. Kellan's married. To 2 other women. In Montana and Nevada. I found the marriage certificates. Now that was interesting. Bigamy. Which means my marriage to you was never legally dissolved. Which means I'm technically married to 4 people. 3, I corrected. Our marriage is still valid until the divorce is finalized. Can you help me, please? I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 20 years, who'd thrown our life away for a criminal who collected wives like baseball cards. I'll think about it. But I was already thinking, and what I was thinking would have terrified her if she'd known. Because Jade was right about one thing. This was bigger than our marriage now. And if Kellan Brooks was selling government secrets, there were people who would be very interested in that information. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my cousin Danny, who worked for the State Department in Washington. The second was to a private investigator named Sharon Kellaway, who specialized in finding things people didn't want found. The third was to a lawyer, not for divorce proceedings, but for something much more interesting. By afternoon, I had confirmation of what Jade had told me. Kellan Brooks was indeed married to multiple women across several states. He was also under investigation by federal authorities for his business dealings, though they didn't have enough evidence to move forward. Yet. That evening, I got another call from Jade. He knows I was gone last night. He's asking questions. What did you tell him? That I couldn't sleep and went for a drive. But he doesn't believe me. And Asher? There are cameras in your house. He's been watching you. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What kind of cameras? Small ones. Hidden. He installed them weeks ago, before we even started, before we got involved. He's been planning this for a long time. Planning what? I don't know. But whatever he's doing, you're part of it. After I hung up, I walked through my house with new eyes. It took me an hour to find the first camera, hidden in the living room smoke detector. The second was in the kitchen, disguised as part of the coffee maker. The third was in my bedroom. Kellan Brooks had been watching me for months, studying me, learning my routines, my habits, my weaknesses. The question was why. I left the cameras in place, but started being very careful about what I did and said in my own home. Instead, I began spending time at Sharon Kellaway's office, planning what came next. Because if Kellan wanted to play games, I was ready to play. But he was about to learn that some games have higher stakes than others, and some players don't follow the rules. The federal agents arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was eating breakfast. 2 of them serious-faced and wearing identical dark suits, like they'd stepped out of a government training manual. Mr. Trevan, Agent Sarah Mitchell, State Department. This is Agent Tom Bradley. We need to talk. I invited them in, wondering if Kellan's cameras were still recording. If they were, he was about to get quite a show. We understand you've been in contact with your cousin Daniel Trevan regarding some concerns about national security, Agent Mitchell said as we sat in my living room. That's right. We'd like you to tell us everything you know about Kellan Brooks. So I did. I told them about the affair, about Jade's discovery of the documents, about the mysterious meetings and the foreign buyers. I told them about the bigamy and the cameras in my house. What I didn't tell them was that I'd already been working with Sharon Kellaway to document everything. "Mr. Trevan, we're going to ask you to do something that might seem unusual," Agent Bradley said when I finished. "We want you to maintain your normal routine while we investigate. Don't let Mr. Brooks know that we've been here. You want me to be bait. We want you to be a concerned citizen who's helping his country. And if Brooks decides I'm a threat?" The agents exchanged a look. "We'll be monitoring the situation closely." After they left, I sat in my kitchen thinking about what I'd gotten myself into. Then I called Sharon. "How closely do you think closely is?" I asked her. "Close enough to write a report about your unfortunate demise, probably. These people don't mess around, Asher. Then we better move fast." That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "Your wife's lawyer is working with Brooks. Check the files I'm sending." The files contained copies of emails between Marlowe Trasker and Kellan discussing strategy for the divorce proceedings. But they also contained something much more interesting: evidence that Trasker was helping Kellan access classified documents through his law firm's government contracts. The corruption went deeper than anyone had realized. I forwarded everything to Agent Mitchell, then settled in to wait for the next move. It came sooner than expected. Thursday evening, I was in my garage working on the truck when I heard the kitchen door open. I hadn't heard a car in the driveway, which meant whoever it was had walked up through the woods behind my property. I grabbed a wrench and moved toward the connecting door between the garage and the house. "Asher Trevan?" The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Who's asking?" "A friend of Kellan's," Felix roared. "We need to talk." I'd heard that name before. Felix was one of the contacts in Jade's secret phone. "About what?" "About your wife. About the things she's been saying. About the problems you're causing for my business associate." I opened the door slowly. Felix Roard was a small, wiry man with the kind of face that had seen too much violence. His hands were shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that make people nervous. The kind that require solutions." "And you're here to provide a solution?" "I'm here to offer you a choice. Walk away from this situation, keep your mouth shut, and everyone stays healthy. Keep stirring up trouble, and things get complicated." I tightened my grip on the wrench. "Complicated how?" Felix smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Accidents happen, Mr. Trevan. Houses catch fire. Cars have brake problems. People slip and fall downstairs." "Is that a threat?" "It's a prediction." Where had I heard that phrase before? Oh, right. I'd used it on Kellan at the bar. "Tell your boss I'm not interested in walking away." "That's unfortunate." Felix started to pull his hand from his jacket pocket. I didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. 20 years of working with heavy machinery had given me quick reflexes and strong arms. The wrench caught him across the wrist before he could clear whatever he was carrying. He yelped and stumbled backward, cradling his arm. "You're making a mistake." "No, Felix, you made the mistake when you came to my house." I followed him to the kitchen door and watched him disappear into the woods. Then I called Agent Mitchell. "They just escalated," I told her when she answered. "We know. We've been watching. Are you hurt?" "No, but this is getting serious fast." "Pack a bag, Mr. Trevan. We're moving you to a safe location until we can wrap this up." "What about Jade?" "What about her?" "She's in danger, too. More danger than I am, probably." There was a pause. "We'll handle Mrs. Trevan." "Handle her how?" "She's agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution." So Jade had made another choice, another trade. This time, she was trading her husband's safety for her own protection. Some things never change. 2 hours later, I was in the back of an unmarked federal vehicle, watching my house disappear in the rearview mirror. The agents were taking me to a safe house in the mountains of Vermont, where I'd wait while they built their case against Kellan Brooks. "How long?" I asked Agent Bradley. "Depends on how cooperative your wife is, and how much evidence we can gather before Brooks realizes what's happening." "He already realizes. That's why he sent Felix." "Then we better work fast." The safe house was a cabin on a lake, isolated and defensible. I spent the next 3 days watching the water and thinking about how my life had gone from boring to dangerous in the span of a month. On the 4th day, Agent Mitchell brought news. "We arrested Brooks this morning, and Trasker, and Felix Roard." "What about Jade?" "She's in protective custody. The evidence she provided was enough to charge Brooks with espionage, conspiracy, and about a dozen other federal crimes." "And the bigamy?" "That's the least of his problems now." I stared out at the lake. "So it's over." "Not quite. Brooks had partners we're still tracking down, and there's the matter of the forged artwork." "Forged artwork?" "Your wife's credentials were used to authenticate millions of dollars in counterfeit pieces. Brooks was running an art fraud operation alongside the espionage. Mrs. Trevan claims she didn't know, but you're not sure if you believe her. Let's just say her credibility is somewhat compromised." That evening, I got a phone call from Jade. She was crying again. "Asher, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen. They're saying I might have to testify against Kellan. They're saying I might have to go into witness protection." "That's probably for the best." "What about us? What about our marriage?" I looked out at the lake, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "There is no us, Jade. There hasn't been for a long time. You made sure of that." "But we could start over. We could—" "This is how regret usually starts," I said, and hung up. The next morning, Agent Mitchell drove me back to Millbrook. My house looked exactly the same, but everything felt different. The cameras were gone, the threat was over, and my wife was entering a new life under federal protection. I was finally free to figure out what came next. But first, I had some unfinished business to take care of. 6 months later, I was sitting in a courtroom in Boston, watching Kellan Brooks receive a 22-year federal sentence for espionage, conspiracy, and art fraud. Jade was in the witness box, testifying about her unwitting participation in his schemes. She looked older, smaller somehow. The excitement she'd been chasing had aged her in ways that 20 years of marriage never had. When she finished her testimony, she glanced toward the gallery where I was sitting. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw everything I needed to see: regret, fear, and the crushing weight of choices that couldn't be undone. After the sentencing, I walked outside into the crisp autumn air. Boston was beautiful this time of year, all golden leaves and clear skies. "Mr. Trevan?" I turned to find Agent Mitchell approaching. "How are you adjusting to civilian life?" "Better than expected." "And your wife?" "Ex-wife. The divorce was finalized last month. She'll be relocated after the appeals process is complete. New identity, new life. It's probably for the best." "Probably." Agent Mitchell studied my face. "You don't seem particularly upset about losing your family." "I didn't lose my family. I discovered I never really had one." "That's a harsh way to look at it." "It's an honest way to look at it." I walked back to my truck, thinking about the conversation I'd had with Judy the week before. My daughter had called from college. She'd started at a school in California, as far from the scandal as she could get. "Dad, I owe you an apology." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. I said terrible things. I chose Mom's side without knowing what was really happening. You were 16. 16-year-olds make bad choices. So do 39-year-old women, apparently." We'd talked for an hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years. She was studying engineering, following in her old man's footsteps. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "Are you going to be okay?" she'd asked before we hung up. "I'm going to be fine." And I was. Better than fine, actually. The settlement from the divorce had been straightforward, I kept the house, my pension, and my dignity. Jade kept her freedom and her new identity, courtesy of the federal government. The patents from my security work, the real reason Kellan had been watching me in the first place, were worth more than I'd ever imagined. Turns out 20 years of solving mechanical problems had given me some valuable insights into security systems. I'd also started seeing Sharon Kellaway, the private investigator who'd helped me document everything. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly honest about what she wanted from life. No games, no hidden agendas, no secret phones. "You're different than I expected," she'd told me on our first real date. "Different how?" "Less bitter. Most people who go through what you went through come out angry." "I'm not angry. I'm grateful." "Grateful?" Jade did me a favor. She showed me who she really was before I wasted any more time pretending she was someone else. Sharon had laughed at that. Most people would call that a glass-half-full perspective. Most people haven't been through what I've been through. Now, driving back to Millbrook after the sentencing, I thought about that conversation, about second chances and new beginnings, and the difference between excitement and happiness. My phone buzzed with a text from Sharon. "How did it go?" "Justice served," I replied. "Dinner tonight? I'll cook." Sounds perfect. And it did sound perfect. Not exciting, maybe, but perfect in the way that real life is perfect. Steady, reliable, built on trust, instead of adrenaline. I pulled into my driveway as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house looked good. I'd been making improvements, fixing things that had been broken for years. Inside, I poured myself a drink and sat in my favorite chair, thinking about the path that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a boring husband, with a restless wife and a resentful daughter. Today, I was a free man with a promising future and a daughter who respected me. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" "Asher, it's me." Jade's voice was different, smaller, more hesitant. "How did you get this number?" "I'm not supposed to call, but I wanted you to know. I wanted to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That you were right. About everything. About Kellan. About the choices I made. About what I was trading away." I didn't respond. "I know it's too late. I know I can't undo what I did, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I lost." "This is how regret usually starts," I said quietly. "Yes, it is. Goodbye, Jade." "Goodbye, Asher." I hung up and deleted the number. Then I finished my drink, locked up the house, and drove to Sharon's place for dinner. Behind me, my old life faded into the darkness. Ahead, something new was waiting. Something real. Something worth building.